Hi, welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery. Today we're going to have a look at our exhibition, Quilt National 2021. This is the best of contemporary quilts, and this exhibition is produced and circulated by the Dairy Barn Art Center. And speaking of the Dairy Barn Art Center, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Holly. Holly, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Kat. Hi, I'm Holly Ittel. I'm the Exhibitions and Quilt National Director at the Dairy Barn Art Center. Quilt National has been running now for 43 years. It's a biennial exhibition that was founded in 1979 by artists Virginia Randalls, Nancy Crow, and Francoise Barnes.
That's pretty exciting, right? Like, the Dairy Barn has a long history, and this exhibition is really important in the fiber community. Can you talk a little bit about that importance, like how that was rested within the Dairy Barn's kind of rejuvenation?
Yeah. So in the late 70s, the Dairy Barn, before it was an art center, the Dairy Barn building was vacant, had been vacant for, I believe, nearly 2 decades, when it was said to be demolished. A group of artists physically came to the Dairy Barn in front of the demolishing team and said, nope, stop, we're going to save this building. And they quite literally talked to their representatives and rescued the barn from demolition. And a part of that saving of the barn was to create a fine art exhibition that was respected outside of our local community within about a year of it opening. So that's where Quilt National was developed, to celebrate a new genre of quilting that is now known as contemporary quilting.
And that's really kind of set us on a path of true respect for the incredible art of fiber artists, right? Like, we are here in an epicenter in Ohio. We have phenomenal artists right here, and this great organization that supports that. And this is a worldwide exhibition. So, like, just to think about that and the history and having that rooted here, I think is really important for folks to understand.
Yeah, Quilt National is the preeminent contemporary quilt exhibition. People work their entire art career to be in Quilt National. Some of our Quilt National artists have been in numerous times that are very well known in the contemporary art or contemporary quilt world. This show has traveled internationally. We have international visitors in a typical Quilt National year. People travel all over the world to come to Ohio to see this show.
So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at the pieces that we have on this title ball. Let's pop right over to that one. Tell us a little bit about it, Holly.
This piece is by Anne Smith, who is an artist from the UK. It's titled Brittle, Crazy Glass. This tells a story of when the artist visited New York City, and she went with a friend to bring meals to homeless people. She met quite a few folks, but here she depicted some of the people who were most vivid in her memory. She drew them by memory using and depicted them here through all recycled fabrics. The story she tells about this main standing figure was that this man had a little bit of a, stirry eyes, maybe an intimidating look, but after coming back time and time again to bring food, she got to know him. And one of the days that she was with him, he was bragging about his new shirt and how great it looked, but his friends were teasing him that it was a woman's blouse. But she also is talking about the sadness and the hard parts, of course, of the situation, such as this female figure who was sitting under a rodent bait sign on the streets of New York City.
So, Holly, something that really strikes me about this work, it's just super striking in general, but to think about the personality and individualism that this artist has given to these folks that she is immortalized through this piece. She really is breaking down the idea of the monolith, like this idea that unhoused people are all the same. They're not. They're individuals, and this is a really lovely representation of that.
Yeah, she's certainly not trying to speak to homelessness as a whole, but to give life and personality and humanity to just two people who she met who were in a situation that she experienced.
Yeah, that's lovely. Wonderful. Let's pop over to this next piece.
This is an exciting piece. It's by Kit Vincent, who is from Ontario, Canada. It's titled Fracas, which is an Italian word meaning something like an uproar. This piece won Best in Show in Quilt National 21, and it explores themes relating to chaos and order. This artist uses a lot of techniques to create this composition. She's using dyeing work and painting to create what she calls the underpainting, meaning similar to what painters do when they are preparing their canvas. They'll do an underpainting before they create the composition. Something I love about this piece is how you have so many treats as you look at it. You see the main bold colors of the lines on top of the surface, but then when you look further back into it, you see more depth in the underpainting and various techniques that the artist uses.
So another thing that I really enjoy about this work is that this artist is really punching up color in a way that kind of delights the eye. So there's some things that happen when you place particular colors next to other colors, and they have maybe similar value but contrasting hue. So up here you'll see some scintillation. If you look at it, your eyes start to kind of vibrate a little bit. And not only does it happen there, but just by the use of kind of this sketching of line and bringing them together in the whole and really directing the viewer's eye, you see these really exciting patterns emerge. And then, just like you said, Holly, there's this, as you get closer, you get to see the history of the work. And that's super exciting, like seeing the furthest back layer and the gestural marks under there. It just pulls you in.
Mm-hmm. Something I love about this piece is a term that I like to call power clashing, where you put these bold hot pinks next to a bright orange on top of a blue and pink. It really is just a treat to explore the different color combos the artist has created in this piece.
Power clashing. I think we got to make that go viral. We're
Yes.
going to continue with power clashing.
Hashtag power clash.
Yes, wonderful. I'm taking that forward. It's in my pocket. I'm going to bring it out whenever I need it. All right, how about this one?
Yeah, this piece is titled Red January by Holly Ittel. She lives in Omaha, Nebraska, and creating this piece, or when she speaks about this piece, she calls it Red January because January has been an angry month for her for numerous reasons. One that she gave was just it's cold, it's uncomfortable. Another reason is that politically January has been a frustrating month for the artist to live through. She made this original design through a drawing when she was temporarily disabled after a car accident. She's fine now, I believe. But when she wasn't able to move her neck because she was in a brace collar thing, she drew this design, which she then translated into fabric. And I believe it took her quite a few years to complete. She comes from an engineering background, so she's very fascinated with math and geometry.
So in this one, I love the contrast of the curvilinear line to the really rectilinear. So she's got these, both color is contrasting, and then use of line is contrasting, and then how she quilts on top of that. So the other thing, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit, when you're looking at a quilt, a fine art quilt, there are a variety of things that come into it, right? So you'll see the pieces coming into a whole, but then as you get closer, they give you a treat of how they quilt the piece. So like on these circular forms, if you get close enough, you realize that there's also this twirly treat for you to enjoy. So just wanted to call that out. And Holly, can you talk a little bit as we go on to the next one about what is a contemporary quilt?
Yeah, sure. So the Dairy Barn defines a quilt as two or more layers of fabric-like material connected with a stitch. We respect these contemporary quilts as fine artworks, and they must be of original design to be included in Quilt National. So some of them may very well reference traditional quilting techniques, but the design as a whole, the composition needs to be
That artist's design. That makes sense.
Must be unique. This piece is by Carrie Green from Dallas, Texas. It's titled Family Meeting. This piece really, I think you can relate to this. I think anyone who has a family can relate to this piece, how you're connected, but separated from your loved ones. And that connection is, to me, I read this as verbal, like connections through, talking, calling on the phone. But the connection runs in numerous ways, bringing families together. But also, she shows a separation of the family units, which we all definitely experienced at the time this was made during the COVID pandemic.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think another thing that I really appreciate about this work, again, those vibrant colors and the big jumps between value to give you this striking graphic image. Mm-hmm. And then you come up closer and see this uniting line, those vertical lines of quilting that just literally tie it all together,
Absolutely.
Really lovely. All right, let's go around the corner.
This piece is titled Sun on My Patio Chair 2020 Isolation by Jean M. Evans, who lives in Medina, Ohio. This piece explores the isolation that many of us felt early in the pandemic, where we couldn't leave our homes without fear of the consequences that may happen if we do leave. And so much unknown and uncertainty. But here she depicts her chair on her patio with the harsh contrast in the shadow values, and but of course including the beautiful, colorful life of daffodils in her garden.
So what really strikes me about this, one is the design of the work. Like, stepping away from it and looking at it formally, it's beautifully composed image, and then the additional treat of it being a fiber work, it pulls you in to ask more questions, to understand more about how is this created? Is this pieced? Is this marking by the artist? How are we approaching this? How should we understand it? And there is something really, I think the artist hit it right on the head, talking about in the title, isolation. You really get that feeling from that raking light, and this almost coziness of a place, but it's devoid of human. Right. So there's a lot there to really unpack.
Yeah, and I think this piece is so approachable because it is something so commonplace. We've all seen a patio chair, but the artist has shown this in a significant way to illustrate that emotion and feeling.
Yeah, it's also the hierarchy. Like, you think about what are you concentrating within your image, and this artist has selected sensibly a chair for us to have a look at. The function of a chair is to seat someone, right? And to be devoid of that function, what then comes through. I also really I love how here the artist captured almost fully within the handle shape shadow the repeat pattern of blocks, but allows for it to kind of fade through, and you understand that not only is the seat of the chair really brightly lit, but so is the ground beneath it, so they don't repeat it further, but you get that validation down here. And it's just, lovely details, right?
She made great choices of what was needed and not to get the illustration across. And the way she uses her materials to paint and draw, but then also using her stitches, her quilting to illustrate this piece and the movement throughout.
Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. All right. And this one continues on with our, so this wall, I had a lot of fun, putting these two together. They're vastly different, but they hold the same color structure, right? So having that dichotomy and then having that conversation between the two pieces. I'll let you talk about the piece though. Go ahead.
This piece is by Anna Brown, who's an Australian artist. It's titled Reflections 5. I love this piece. I love the luscious materials that she's using with this yellow and cream ivory colored silk compared to these cotton fabrics that she has in here. And she's hand quilted the entire piece. And hand quilting, just people are familiar with it, whether you know that or not. And it's a humble technique, and it just adds so much value and texture and dimension to this beautiful piece.
Having the artist hand in that, like recognizing there are qualities that you can get from a machined piece that are really, really beautiful. But there is nothing that you can machine that will give you the genuine texture of a hand-quilted piece. It's just different. There are different qualities, and this one really does highlight that beautifully. Another thing that I think is really smart, in the same way that Jean did, things are quilted differently. So you'll see the white stitching here versus the black stitching there, which gives you a different visual effect, right? It is essentially the same kind, but that was a really important choice in order to make the overall design work.
Certainly. Something about this quilt design that I just think is such a treat to have learned was that she had made all of these blocks of with the silk of this one shape, a round shape, and then she cut it up and rearranged it. And then, using the white, black, and yellow, like in here and down here. And then she had this commercial fabric, pre-made fabric, that actually is used in this piece and connects so well. And I just find that like such a great use of material, that this is a commercial piece, commercial fabric here, but combined and connecting so strongly with the composition that she's created in these individual blocks.
I think that's something that I really love about fiber artists in general, is that there's a willingness to hone in and really nearly perfect the craft and then break it.
Yeah.
Right? So we see that really well represented within this piece. And then there's that treat of like that frayed edge. Like it's just so, like everything's, so tightly well done, and then she gives you that. Yeah, all right, let's go on to the next one.
This piece is by Donnelly Kennedy, who is from Marble Cliff, Ohio. It's titled Reaching Out 8, and it's part of her Reaching Out series.
Got an award.
Oh, and it won the Quilt Surface Design Symposium Award, and the Quilt Surface Design Symposium, or QSDS, happens in Columbus every summer, where artists come and study surface design techniques.
So that's a nice honor for someone whose surface is clearly very important. So we were chatting a little bit earlier about how when someone comes into a gallery and they're exploring and connecting with work, how you can do that. And so let's use this one as an example.
Sure.
So when we come into it, what you can do as a viewer, really, one, super great to have a friend with you, because discussion about art helps you unlock things that you might not be able to do just by yourself, unless you have a really active communication with yourself. Lots of people talk to themselves, totally fine if you do. I like to do it with a buddy. So here, I'm taking some cues from the title, right? Reaching out. So we have some things in there, but even further back from that, as I step away from the work, I can see it almost has quadrants, right? And then within that, if you're further away from it, you can describe those quadrants pretty well with like a greenish feel happening over here, yellow, blue, red, orange. And then you get closer and you recognize that the artist has taken pains to represent that color block with a variety of colors, and some that are so close together that you almost wouldn't see it unless you take the time, right? So the other thing that I really enjoy about this piece is not only is the artist thinking about how to softly take a viewer through color exploration, they're also exploring value too in that reaching out. So here, this really kind of has that feel as a viewer. And then if you give yourself the time, you recognize that she's also given us that gift within this gray piece. Like there's, you find it happening again and again.
Yeah, this black and gray motif really gives the push and pull of foreground and background, and where the color elements lie maybe is up to the viewer.
Also, like what a treat, going from that light blue to that light yellow.
Yeah.
Like, come on. It's good stuff. All right, let's pop open that.
This piece is titled Bookends by Catherine Baird from Springfield, Oregon. It is one of the widest pieces in the exhibition. I think it's right about 100 inches wide, which is the max length of quilts accepted into Quilt National. This piece has just a beautiful color combination happening here. I mean, just from my aesthetic, I love some of these color combos happening with that blush pink and the pale pink next to the orange, and then moving into the beautiful blues. I really think the artist did a great job of keeping the eye moving in this piece. Your eye does not want to sit for too long in any one place.
So something that you can recognize in works like this, particularly, quilting is already difficult. And then you add taking into account these curved lines and piecing together in such a way that it still remains flat. That is super hard to do.
Right.
So, I mean, you have this curve, but yet you still have these understandings of triangles. And just thinking about mathematically how you can lay that out. Mm-hmm. You've talked a little bit about this, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but quilt artists, fiber artists in general, typically have a board that they use.
Right.
Their walls are, they can attach to, and they can use that kind of like as a sketching surface to work, rework, place, replace.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So many artists, especially ones working improvisationally, which means, well, maybe they have a design in mind, but they like to let their color palette or motif lead the composition. They'll work on their design wall where they'll pin a piece of fabric, pin the next one around it or next to it, and then maybe they know this pink line needs to be there. They'll pin that there, and they like the yellow right next to it. So they have all these loose pieces of fabric pinned to their wall. Oh, I don't like that, so they can swap it all up and work really intuitively to create a wonderful composition and palette. I'm not sure that that's exactly how this artist worked, but that's how I would guess that she worked on this piece. And it looks like she did work in somewhat of a block form, where she might have created this block, this blue block here, and then pieced and arranged the composition together.
Yeah, that's great. I like kind of looking behind the curtain, if you will, whenever I can, and helping folks. Certainly lots of quilt artists already know this stuff. This is all cat for them. But for folks that are new to this, I think it's really important to kind of give you an understanding of the enormity of time, work, effort, and design that goes into creating a piece like this.
So 2 techniques that we'll continue to speak about pretty often is piecing, which is joining 2 pieces of fabric together, and this artwork is pieced quite a few times. And then quilting. Quilting is the stitching that connects the layers of fabric that make the the face, the design overall. And quilting can be used to create a canvas per se, or to draw or paint with the thread.
Perfect. I think that's a great segue to our next piece.
This is another large piece by Michael Ross, who is from New Hope, Pennsylvania. It's titled Mutations number 13, and he has a Mutations series that all have a similar look and color palette. This, like I said, I mean, I can't speak for the artist, of course, but I do feel like he's using these quilt lines to create a canvas for his design to lie on. But in those quilt lines, you can see he used a shimmery thread that gives a little special element and dimension to the piece.
And you won't get that unless you get close to it, which, you know, it's a reward for looking close, taking your time.
Right, and this artist is an expert in looking at the value of color itself, looking for the amount of black and white in a hue. And you can see that where he's matching up contrasting values and complementing values. Well, now it's going to show my knowledge of those. So let's see.
So contrasting.
Sure, yeah. Here's contrasting. Well, here's some complementing values with clearly contrasting values. You know, these two are contrasting these lighters.
Wonderful. And then this one received an award as well.
Oh, right. This piece received the Homeland Award, which is awarded to one quilt from an artist who lives in Ohio or the surrounding states.
Wonderful. All right, let's move over to this one.
This is a really exciting piece. It won the Young Emerging Artist Award. It's titled Watercolor Study Number 7 by Audrey Essery. And she's from Louisville, Kentucky. She was inspired by a watercolor technique where you paint watercolor, let it dry fully, and then do another layer, and that allows you to get these nice crisp lines and depth within the color. And then she translated this to fabric. She hand dyed this fabric and layered it and composed it in a way that shows just the value through these deeper gray to this beautiful fog gray into a white background.
Yeah, the intensity of time and organization in getting those lines just right, getting those values just right.
Yeah.
The visual texture of that is just gorgeous. It almost reminds me, it has this architectural feel to it.
Certainly.
That I just adore. It feels like an archway. It also has, you know, this kind of lunar feel to it. This exploration of value is just stunning. You can see it virtually, of course, but seeing it in person and getting up close and like recognizing the work and like that, how beautifully it flows, even within the texture, from the darker to the lighter. It really is impressive.
Yeah, and the architecture of this piece is so well seen through her expert curved piecing that she's done throughout. I mean, it is just beautifully, precisely pieced. And the lovely quilting where she's done a consistent quilt cross with, again, a shimmery thread that gives just a little extra pop and value to the piece. And I think that does help it kind of relate back to the lunar references, at least for me too. Yeah. Lovely. This piece is by Leanne Heilman, and it's titled Where Once a Tree Was Standing. This was a very popular piece when it was on display at Quilt National at the Dairy Barn. And I mentioned that to the artist, and I asked her why. Why do you think so many people love this piece? And she said, well, everyone has a windmill. Everyone has a windmill story or something that they can relate to about a windmill. And personally, it felt very relevant to me and my family. My grandfather restored antique windmills and placed them on our farm, and he had one incomplete when he passed away in late 2020. And so for my family, my parents came to see the show. This is the one that they gravitated to, of course. And we're not from the desert at all, but it's all in this windmill, like she said, like the artist said.
Yeah, there are such beautiful ways that we can connect to each other in those like landmarks. That's a really great way to do so. I also love that there's just like this element of like stitching up there that can be construed in a variety of ways. Like what are we looking at fully? Can I imagine something that's maybe a little bit different than Holly imagines?
Right.
I also really enjoy how this artist has used the quilting as a functional element within the design. So here you can see the quilting has actually become a part of the grasslands. And is describing that through the thread, right? It's
absolutely
just really lovely.
And the artist uses a lot of representational landscapes. So she says this fallen dead tree represents, the death and the end of something. Vast space leading to the mountains. The mountains are steadfast and will always be there, have been there. And then the last element that she added before she completed this quilt was the windmill that is now reaching up to the sky in hope, into the heavens, into the sublime.
Perfect. Can't say anything better than that.
This piece is by Susan Heyman. She is a German artist. It's titled Faded News. This piece is a really good one to investigate. You have to get up close to see that she's making use of old newspapers that she's twisted and pulled down into these small linear lines and then repeated that throughout with fabric between and her quilting lines between.
So something that really struck me about this piece as well is that not only does it beg you to come closer and see what's happening with this color, like from far away it feels very muted, but it gives you that gift upon closer inspection of a variety of colors, modulated softly, but then within those lines, that captured newsprint, you have these really vibrant colors that still play right into the muted palette that this artist has composed. I also really appreciate that there is a familiarity to this visual texture for me in those handmade rugs. Like that has a similar shape, it has a similar visual.
Sure.
And so it immediately felt comforting to me when I looked at it. And then getting to see it closer and seeing that, soft kind of sage to the soft mauve, and then the hand stitching that also accentuates that. It really it begs for closer inspection.
Yeah. I think that makes a good point about fiber art as a whole, that it is so common to be surrounded by fiber with your clothing, your bedding. It's just within your home, you're comforted by it, you swaddle your babies in it. So that's truly, I feel, what makes fiber art approachable to any visitor, whether you're an expert art historian or someone who's never taken time to experience art. Fiber art is very approachable, very
you have a
inviting.
point of reference. Yeah, absolutely. You know it. You feel it just exactly as you are, how you arrive in a space. You have a point of reference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
This piece is titled Summer Inferno Number 7 by Sandra Champion. She lives in Tasmania, an island state of Australia. She uses for her work, some typical techniques that she uses in materials such as like this corrugated cardboard that makes this very textured piece that she fades her newspaper and newsprint and materials in multiple ways of like, I believe she soaks them sometimes to peel some of the printed artwork off of the cardboard or whatever sort of paper she's using. And then she's assembled it into this piece that is speaking about a terrible tragedy that happened, multiple tragedies that happened in Australia recently of the bushfires and fires that burnt World Heritage sites and protected lands. And it left the landscape just completely charred and devastated. I think this is a beautiful example through the fiery red, the stark black, the gold that's throughout, to me, illuminating the fire and the light that came from that.
So I think this is the first piece that we're talking about that is using alternative materials.
Sure.
Right? And that's actually more and more common with quilting and fiber artists. And, one is certainly not better than the other, but I love that we have that variety.
Right.
So having that discovery, well, I suppose the last one did have alternate, but getting to have discovery within a work where you have an expectation that this will be one thing, and then getting to reveal that it's many other things, also supporting such an important topic.
Right. Yeah, and she is. This is a conversation about global warming, and I believe the artist is aware, and we're aware that recycling and saving your newspaper is not going to save the world by itself. But by making use of recycled materials, she is minimizing her impact and the impact that this could have been waste in the landfill. But it's actually a fine artwork. And also it adds quite a quality because I had been looking at this piece for months, images of it, and then when it was in the dairy barn, before I finally realized that is cardboard. That is corrugated cardboard. I have been trying to figure out how she got that technique. But it's from the material, and it's so wonderful. That's right. This is a piece by Barbara Napalm, who is from Washington, and is titled Friends. I think that's such a fun title to think about what this artwork means relating to her friends, but I believe she had inherited some hand-dyed fabrics from her friends that had probably been popping around her studio for a while before she came upon this composition. And I do think it includes some of her own hand-dyed fabrics as well.
Something I really enjoy about this work is the artist's use of quilting to define areas. So even in this really nice burnt orange, she's using this purple, blue, vertical and horizontal striping to define different areas. So what could have been just a flat pane becomes designed.
Right.
It's just exciting to think about how with such a seemingly simple pathway you can change the visual understanding of a piece, right?
Absolutely. Here. So this is a piece by another Australian artist named Judy Hooworth. It's titled Adventure Journal Number 7 on the Silk Road. She has traveled from China to Russia, maybe the other way around. And in those travels with her sister, she took thousands of photos, and not of the landscape or of the people, but of the textures that she saw while on this trip. And so she's relating those textures that she found so interesting into her fabric through different dye techniques, monoprinting, discharge, and then uses those fabrics to make this composition. Again, I'll talk about the quilting because I just absolutely love this grid quilting that she does. You start from the center. I don't know if she did horizontal lines or vertical lines first, and then just made this wonderful grid that I think gives a push and pull of the organic decay of something man-made. You know, these organic lines that we see here, underlaid by this very straight grid.
I love the historical tie-in and you know, thinking about the history of the Silk Road and how many people traversed that and what were they seeing, what were they noticing, and that this artist gravitated towards visual texture and then gives us that gift in this work.
Yeah.
I love work that makes me, that gives me the opportunity to explore my ideas of like, what would I pay attention to? What would I see and want to bring back and share with others?
Yeah.
And where did she find this? Where did this texture come from? You know, like that, it makes you wonder and make up stories, and I really enjoy that about this piece.
Yeah. And I do want to mention we have some artist talks on our YouTube page. If you search the Dairy Barn Art Center on YouTube, Quilt National on YouTube, you'll find some artist talks, and she gives a wonderful artist talk that includes those detailed photos if you do want to learn a little bit more about this.
More Easter eggs.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about this piece too. It's by Kestra Michaud, and she is using a very unique method to create this piece that she had, I think, painstakingly developed. She has created this steampunk world, which is Victorian industrial steampunk. And so she has this whole steampunk world and society that is operating and working. Something she said is like, you always hear about the superhero, but what about the people who make the superhero city work? And that's what those are the characters she explores in her steampunk world. So this is a kite rental, so the RAK Rent-A-Kite. So you can rent a bike here in Ohio. In her world, you can rent a kite to fly to work. It's titled Morning Commute. The way she created this was by illustrating the piece on a computer program somehow, and she numbered each tiny little piece, and then laid out her fabric colors as she needed, and then had her Cricut machine cut out each piece that then she laid back onto her substrate to make this composition.
Let's just take a fraction of a moment, maybe even 3, 5, 10 of those moments, and come a little closer and have a look.
Yeah.
Amanda, if you can come right down here where my shadow is. So we have this description of brick, and then she continues to describe it in the quilting. You cannot see that unless you take time with it. Mm-hmm. And it's like it gives it a little bit of a magic, right? So it's this kind of disappearing bridge.
Right.
It's such a treat to be able to discover that.
Yeah, something I've heard her say in her artist talk that I mentioned on our YouTube channel, that she had been making fabric pictures for years, but she had only been quilting for, well, not so long, maybe a couple of years. And so she said that this piece just stared at her before she finally went in to quilt it. And she quilted it so successfully. You can see the wind and the clouds moving, and then the illustration that she's done through the bridge and the faded fog, or fading into the fog. Here we have Mesh 13 by Sue Benner. She's from Dallas, Texas. Sue has been in a number of Quilt National exhibitions, and this is a part of her Mesh series. This is the 13th of it, and these are exploring grids and fences, the things that we see on the backside of a building often overgrown with plants or falling apart from decay and lack of care. But through those things you can see organic elements like the leaves and the flowers growing up through the fence and the clouds up above.
All right, so Holly, that is a wonderful description of this. I realize we've been having so much fun talking about these pieces. We're going to try and cover all of them, but we're going to have to move a little bit quicker. I'm so sorry. So let's pop over here to Isabel's.
Sure. Yes, we will. This is a very timely piece, so I really want to speak about this. It was made in 2020 during the lockdown. The artist, it's by Isabel Weissler from Germany. It's titled Seeing Through to the End. She talks about how early in the pandemic she was just unable to create, unable to be creative, to make anything conceptual, until we started feeling like, oh, maybe there is life after this, there is hope. And then she just had the image of this piece to illustrate that she had to make. There's holes through in, a little bit of decay, but this beautiful color palette that I feel evokes hope, that helps one see through to the end.
I love the landscape of this one. How you it's really, it reveals itself. But yeah, tell us
Sure.
who is this?
This is by Barbara Oliver Hartman. It's called Inversion. Barbara has been in a number of Quilt Nationals as well, and this is a typical. It's typical to have trees and a landscape in her work. But what I love about this piece is that she has made an inversion of her landscapes. And it's a comment on our effects on the earth that, our fall, we're not having as much fall weather. It's different. So the sky is orange and the trees are blue. And I just love the play and the resource that she used. These are all fabric scraps that she's overlaid to make the leaves in the ground.
So over here we have a dimensional form as well.
Yes, this is by Paula Kavorik, who's from Tennessee. It's titled Invisible, and it's a comment on how women are often visible, especially women, older women are invisible. And she's using quilts that she had made, and then she cut them all up to assemble this garment. It's quirky, it's fun, it's feminine. And it's on these hot rod wheels, and it's ready to move. It's on the go.
That's great. All right, so let's walk and talk a little bit. Our next piece over here is talking about a few things, right? It's got some math maybe going on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, tell us about this work.
This is by artist Carol Krieger, who won the Persistence Pays Award, which means in this exhibition, she's the person who submitted the most amount of times before finally gaining entry to Quilt National. It's called The Mindset. This piece was all inspired by her time meditating. And one meditation session, or maybe a multiple, she saw this repeated geometrical pastel image. And she thought, I think this needs to be a quilt. I can make this into a quilt. She's not known for her pastel colors, but she gave it a go. She uses some technique, piecing technique from indigenous Seminole tribe, and then she overlays it with this very, geometric. Well, it has geometry in it, of course, but then this vortex, this dark vortex that she also saw in another meditation session. And it pulls the composition by placing it in 3 areas where your eye wants to move around to it, and then using this these geometric shapes to really show chaos and order.
All right, well done for persisting and continuing to submit. We're glad you're a part of the exhibition.
Absolutely.
So we've got about 10 more minutes, and we're going to make it through, I promise. So talk about Susan real quick.
Yeah, so this is Playland number 4 by Susan Lapham. This is inspired by her childhood at a local amusement park that she frequented with her friends and siblings. I just think saying that, you get it from this piece. It is playful, it is fun, you can see the people congregating and the vastness of this childhood wonderland that you get to run around.
Love it. Perfect.
This is by Maria Schell, an artist from Alaska. She is using a number of different traditional blocks to change them, manipulate them in a repeated way that then creates this composition. She doesn't use rulers. She doesn't measure things out and do the math to make things match up. So that's part of the fun and the challenge, to get this grid work to match up over, I don't know, maybe 50 or so blocks in this piece.
So that's a lot of piecing.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, we got another Ohio artist here.
Yes, this is by Sandy Schellenberger, who is from, where is she from? Conant, Ohio. It's called Shifting Sands and Sapphire Skies. She uses some traditional Japanese techniques called shibori dyeing, and then which uses a lot of indigo. So you can see that here. And one of the shibori techniques that she uses is to wrap the fabric around a pole, and then you tie it or scrunch it, and then put it in your dye, or in this case, discharge, which removes dye from fabric. She then has a number of pieces of dyed shibori material that she then arranges on her design wall to make a beautiful composition. Another thing I want to point out about this is how she uses this variated thread that just really pulls your eye up and down and gives more life to the piece, and more depth and color.
Yeah, that's great.
This next piece is by Judith Mundweiler. It's titled May 2020. She is again using alternative materials. These are all individual parking cards that are stamped, time stamped, probably location stamped, underlaid with blue aluminum foil. So this piece really sparkles and has a life and luminosity to it. She connects them through these very delicate threads that she leaves hanging off the side of the piece. This piece graced the cover of the Quilt National 21 catalog. It's by Yasuku Saito from Tokyo, Japan. I just think this piece is so gorgeous for a number of reasons. You can see that this artist just used her body in making this and moving the ink around. It's intuitive. It's inviting because you can see the playful nature of it. And then it's on paper as well. So I believe it's handmade paper. It is just it has so much fiber and texture to it. And then it's overlaid with these colorful quilting lines that artists do use colored thread, pretty common in quilting, but her use of it just really gives so much vibrancy and motion.
Wonderful.
Here we have Curve Appeal 28 by Margaret Black, or you might know her as Peggy Black. This is another improvisationally pieced quilt. Peggy says that she loves sewing, and you can tell by the number of teeny tiny little pieces of fabric that she's using to create this composition. She sews a little, irons it, sews a little more, and so on, and then she arranges this fun composition. It's great. Something that is typical in her early work is using an exclamation point to show as a motif, as a repeated motif. And I think that's still referenced a bit in here through this area. particularly where you can see the excitement of the lines. And our last Ohio artist that's in this portion of the Quilt National exhibition is Susan Shy, who's from Worcester, Ohio. This piece is titled Annie and John, 7 of Paring Knives, Swords, and the Kitchen Tarot. This piece is just loaded with imagery and context. So it features, the main characters featured here are Annie Glenn, the wife of John Glenn, who she's holding, and singer-songwriter John Prine. Annie Glenn and John Prine both passed away, I believe, in 2020 of COVID. And we see the Statue of Liberty holding her tablet, pleading that we wear our masks, to show how the feeling of the situation we were in 2020 felt so unreal and unexpected. She's added this spaceship to show that it is just science fiction, but it is such a reality.
I also love the idea of using tarot, like, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it feels otherworldly, but also there's this kind of nod to, can we predict our future?
Yeah, that's a great point of reference. And she, instead of using the swords, she uses the paring knife, which is found in the kitchen, and it provides nourishment to yourself and your loved ones. The paring knives are topped with the palm tree, the peace palm. The border of this quilt is punctuated with an excerpt from a letter that Representative John Lewis wrote, that wrote before his death, but asked to be published the week of his death, which it was. And then let's see, we have lyrics from John Prine songs, I believe, here, information about John Glenn and Annie Glenn. John Glenn's being held by Annie because she was such a support in his life that helped lead him into a successful life.
So yeah, make sure you come on in and have a look, because there's a lot to discover in that one. We have
A lot.
2 more to talk about before we wrap up, so stay tuned.
So this is by Irene Roderick. The title is Corona Spring. So she made this in the spring of 2020, I believe, when we were all totally unsure of what was happening. She didn't intentionally make these circles, but then she did intentionally make the circles, but she didn't intend them to be the coronavirus. But then after you step back and look at it, oh, that's what she made. This piece is so unique. She's using a lot of different techniques and improvisational quilting, but then drawing directly on her fabric. Irene will be jurying Quilt National 23, and you can find more information about the Quilt National 23 call for entry at dairybarn.org.
All right, and our last piece.
Yeah, so this is a really exciting piece to end on. It is so bold in color and in size. It's by Sarah Ward from Auckland, New Zealand. It's titled Disrupted Stones. And so you can see this like stone shape that's disrupted by this cross element, and then echoed through her quilting lines. I was telling Kat what I really love about this piece is the expert color use that she has. These pieces are not overlaid fabric. This is not overlaid with a translucent blue fabric. That is color matching to make it seem as though these colors are actually overlaid.
It's so smartly done. And the other piece that I thought was really interesting is that she used a long arm to essentially draw and repeat the pattern that she has represented in color through the quilting. It's just, that layer upon layer.
Mm-hmm.
Quite literally.
Yeah.
Really smart, really smart. So I know we're at time, so I'm going to close out and remind you all that we have always free programming. You can check us out on rifegallery.eventbrite.com and register for any of our programming. The majority of it is virtual, so you should be able to participate. And we have artist talks as well. So we have 5 of those. Be sure to tune in. Those are on Zoom. We'll also push them live on Facebook. And this, just want to thank you so much for coming and talking about these pieces. I think it's really important for folks not only to understand the breadth of fine art, the inclusion of expertise that is housed here in Ohio in the fiber arts world is just astounding. So big thank you to Holly and the Dairy Barn for partnering in this. And I also want to remind you all that for the first time ever, the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery has a call for curatorial proposals that is live. Our deadline is March 11th at midnight. If you have questions, be sure to get me before that date. I'm happy to answer them. But we so look forward to what everybody proposes because the talent really is in all of you. And we can't wait to celebrate the talents of our curatorial voices in Ohio as well as our phenomenal talents of artists. So to formally close out, thank you to the Ohio Arts Council's board, to the governor, the legislature for supporting the Ohio Arts Council and this great space. Take care.
Thank you.